So my idea for today, I have prepared good examples, I hope, which you can use and learn a lot of stuff from them. But the idea for today is not to give you, a training about how to use the workflow. Actually, about the workflow, Windows Workflow Foundation. So it's not about Windows Workflow Foundation. It's more and exactly on how we use Windows Workflow Foundation in Sitefinity. And the idea is to move towards how you can use this when working with Sitefinity. So that's ideally where we want to move with this webinar. So the first thing I would like to explain here, just a quick introduction to what's working behind the scenes for the workflow. I already mentioned that. It's Windows Workflow Foundation 4.0. And it's one of the reasons we have rewritten Sitefinity to utilize that very new at that time technology, which was 2 years ago. And the first thing I would like to do as a business user, just to create a workflow. So I can create, we have the single step of approval. We have 2 levels of approval, and with the advanced workflow, which if you don't know, it comes with the professional editions, and here you can define more levels of approval as much as you need. And needless to say, in that webinar, we're going to use exactly that customization of the workflow.
So these workflow options that we see here on the interface, this is what we call the standard workflow within Sitefinity. And that's the one that's available with the standard edition. And the customizations that we'll be looking at, those are with the advanced workflow based on Windows Workflow Foundation, are available in the professional edition and up. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay, that's absolutely correct. And I hope the resolution is fine at your end, everybody. If you have issues, just let me know. But the scope of the workflow is per type, and there is a limitation for some user cases. And I would like to show you some practical examples how you can add more logic into scoping the workflow towards the needs of the client. So I will create just a simple workflow, for the stores, which is a dynamic item. So we have the store, and I can set the approvers. In my case, those will be editors. I can also select users as well, work with multiple providers, but just a simple case. We select the editors row and all the members of it. We can notify them by email, which is a pretty good feature, and then the scope is just the stores. All right. So we allowed administrators to skip the workflow, and the workflow is active, and then we have it. So what's going on from this position moving forward? I have opened the project in Visual Studio. I have a class library which I'm going to review later on, as well as this activities folder and the workflows folder. So the workflows folder contains custom workflows I have downloaded from the SDK resources. So that's the beginning, the very beginning. If you have to customize the workflow, you are definitely going to use the XAML files. And for developers, we have provided everything in the SDK. So in my case, the SDK is installed in my computer, so I just went to Telerik, find the latest version of Sitefinity I'm using, and under content we have the resources, and within the resources we have the default workflows, which contains the 4 major XAML files used all across Sitefinity. And as you can see, one is for the pages, one is for just says approval workflow. We use it for the dynamic modules. We have the any media content approval workflow, which we use for the libraries, which is the documents, the images and videos. And we have the any content approval workflow, which we use for all the building content modules like news, blogs, and events, for instance. All right. So with that said, I have taken the approval and the pages approval workflows, and I have pasted those 2 files here. So if I open, for instance, the approval workflow, why not? Let's just open it and see what will be reviewed from the XAML editor. So if any of you have used Windows Workflow Foundation 4.0, that's it. That's exactly what we are using with this. So it's pure .NET thing. It's nothing Sitefinity specific here. And the first thing which you can see, which now applies to Sitefinity only, is the workflow map, the way I call it. So we have the default workflow, which is the condition, and that applies for all the XAML files, which is the condition which applies when we haven't activated any workflow. So even if you don't activate the workflow is still responsible for the content authoring. Then we have the one level of approval which we activated for the stores, and then you have the two levels of approval. So if I go to the default workflow, which is used every time you don't define a workflow, you can see that we have the switch, and from the switch you can see there are different arrows, pointers, which actually describe all the possible actions. So, Ogi, do you know about the quantum theory? So, yeah, that's a map of all the possible states for a given item in our case. So, if you can see the cat from the quantum theory, the Schindler cat, or wherever, I just mistaken it. Anyways, but you can see all the possible conditions. So from this switch, you can see that the item can have the preview action, can have the schedule action, can have the scheduled publishing, save as draft, publish, unpublish, stop scheduling, discard draft. So all the possible states they're here. So it's like a map of possible events. So it's pretty powerful. And this is the best thing I like about the workflow and our implementation about it. That you can easily see all those different possible states or events, and you can react. You can inject custom code and actually interact with those code activities and modify them. All right, so that was that's one of the most important things. So this is alternative to actually the event system inside Sitefinity. It's because it happens on its own, because it has all the possible states. So this is exactly where we inject custom logic. And for the examples, what we can do is probably to this is the approval workflow, which will work for the dynamic modules. So the first thing we need to do to activate this is to go to Sitefinity and actually substitute, which you can find in the documentation, to just go to settings, advanced workflow, and see the different workflows which apply for the different types of content. As you can see, the e-commerce products are also here. So there was a good question which probably some of you may ask about the e-commerce. Does this encapsulate the checkout process? And the answer is it's focused on just content authoring. So it describes the content creation of e-commerce products, not the actual checkout process, which is a good thing to mention here. So let's find the stores which are available over here. So that is the stores type. It points to the virtual folder with the embedded default workflow XAML files we ship Sitefinity with. And I can just point this to the physical folder workflows, which I have in the root of my folder over here, and point to the approval workflow. Simple as that. Click Save, and from now on, that file will be used. So let's do something very, very basic and probably just track what will happen when we have a one level of approval, which is here for the stores. And you see we have different states, like what to happen when we have the item waiting for approval, or what happens when the item is in draft mode. So just to, I'm trying to translate this into a meaningful language. So again, we're in the draft mode and we have the different actions. So for instance, when we send the item for approval, we just follow the arrow. We have the decision activity which is responsible for providing the UI for that. So at runtime, this will be executed to see whether this button shall be rendered. And from the other end, it will be executed when the logic goes through this, when the backend logic goes through this. So about the UI, just to mention that I have the source code here before we interact with it. Under Telerik Sitefinity we have the workflow folder, and we have this very, very important file, which is the flowchart inspector. So that is the class which crawls through the workflow XAML files at runtime when the UI is built, and it allows us to, it actually is responsible for rendering the buttons. So it reads the different activities. It recognizes just a limited amount of those. So it definitely recognizes the decision activities, and based on those, it creates the different buttons. So for instance, if you go to decision activity, and I can easily do that. So let's just go here and probably open a session in Internet Explorer and log in as a content author. So I will log in as Anna and just see the default behavior. Just to let you know, meanwhile I have configured the email notification settings. So the checkbox I've created to allow the workflow to send emails would send emails to that, very useful to the SNTP for dev. So if you don't have it, just Google for it. It's free. It's a very good tool. So in my case,
that basically simulates an email server.
Yeah, okay. And it's all local, and I have a couple of those open. So it listens on this port 45. And if we go as admin again, just to show you that, under administration settings, if you're wondering how to activate this, just to quickly show you, under notifications, we have the different profiles, and that's the default profile, and I just send this to localhost on port 45. I can send it anywhere I would like to, but in my case, I listen to the exactly same coordinates. Simple as that. Okay. And we would like that to disappear. Probably it won't. Okay. So go back to as Anna and create a store. Why not? So now when we click create a store, the workflow shall be responsible for doing this. So I can create our new store. Oh, you just give me a city which is easy to type.
Chicago.
I think we already have such a store, but let's try. All right. And probably I will use a very simple number. Of course, a fictitious one. And I can just send this for approval. So the flowchart inspector was reading this with the workflow service. And on the workflow host, the workflow chart was inspecting the XAML file, and it decided that based on the fact that I'm Anna and I'm just a content author, and based on the status of that item which is in draft mode, I shall see that send for approval button. So this is how the UI adapts based on the workflow state. So I can just click send for approval, and we shall expect for the email. Just close the options. So you see 4 users which are member of the editor's role have received emails which are practically the same. So if I open this, we shall see that a very good message saying a new item is awaiting your approval. But in our case, all of those 4 users have received email. Very often I receive the question how to limit this. So probably people responsible for the English translations, so only they shall receive the email, and people responsible for the Spanish translations, like in our case, shall see the Spanish. Well,
Changes to the Spanish only content.
Yeah. So let's do it. How about it?
That would be great.
Okay, let me delete those emails because we don't need them at this point. And what shall we do? Go to Visual Studio. So this is where, let's track this. So we are into the default mode again. That's the workflow which we are using. So we have activated one level of approval, correct? And the position from which we send emails is when the item is in draft mode, and then we send this for approval. So it's located over here, the draft item workflow, and the action which executes is when we click the send for approval button. So you see what it does? It's just checking the item, and it goes through this. Oh, that's annoying. Good. Fix it. So from here, decision activity to send for approval. Then we have the execute code activity, which is executes this code, which checks in the item and then saves the changes with the Fluent API. And then we use the notify group activity, which sends a message to all the users from the eligible roles for approvers. In our case, just all members of the editor's role. So let's change that. So I have already done that, and it's in the language notify store item activity. Actually, it's that one, notify group by language. So in my case, I have inherited from the notify group, which is a Sitefinity activity. So if we track this down, I will show you how it works. Let's just go to the source code so you can see this in action. So all of those activities are part of the Windows Workflow Foundation, and if you trace those down to the ancestors, they all inherit from code activity, which is of type system activities. So that's the most essential type, and for our case we have added all the logic to get the users, build the email. So I would like to inherit this as higher as I can in the, and that's actually inheriting from here, from the notify group. And in my case, I can just override this get emails method, which gets the emails. So in my case, I just get the base list of emails, which is provided by Sitefinity, and then for each of those emails, I do a check. And I get the users based on their emails. So I get the users by the email provided in the list of emails, which is returned by the base method. And then for each of those users, I get a property from their profiles, which is associated culture. So I have built a custom field to be stored in the profile. So if we go to users as admin, we can go to manage profile types. And here under basic profile, I have added associated culture, which is a multiple choice. And if we go to any user like Pablo, yeah, I'm very proud of this user because it's actually Pablo Picasso. And this is the field here, associated culture, English or Spanish for that quantum website. So simple as that, Woggy. What do you think? Is it straightforward?
Yes, it does seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think somebody commented that my microphone is not working, so I have to lean in a little bit. Yeah, this makes sense. And can you actually see it in action?
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the associated culture, which is a field available only for admins, and we will say which culture applies for that editor. That's it. So if we have selected Spanish culture with the key, then we will send notifications only when a Spanish item passes through the workflow. And if it's English, we'll send emails only when the item passes through the workflow or store is in English. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio and just make sure we see that. So we do a check here, get the value of this associated culture field for each of the users, and then we say if the associated culture is not null, and then if the associated culture is the same as the current culture, which is the culture of the item, then we add the email of that user to the list. So this is how we narrow down the list of emails for that particular item in the workflow state. So the way to activate this is pretty simple. So now we just need to replace this with our custom notify group by language. So we just go to Toolbox, and XAML editor will load all the classes which inherit from code activity or any other related class. So we should just find notify group by language, drag it here in the corresponding location, and just remove that with this. So we're done. And since we follow the same logic used by the Sitefinity notify group in that specific example, I need to probably copy the approve. And in our case, approve group means all the editors. So that's why I need to select that. And from the editors, we'll narrow down and we have the message, and then we can just click save. And we shall be good to go. So let's try this now. So let's switch to Spanish as Anna. Okay, let me just refresh and create a new store. This is in English, so let me go back to Spanish actually, and create a new store which will be named Madrid. Okay, I can play with the map, but this cool thing, so let's do it. So it's in Spain, and we can send this for approval, and let's see the result now. So we receive all the 4 emails. That means that probably we are working with the cached instance of this. So let's force application restart and repeat the procedure. So I'll just go to our web app, open up the web config, you know, this procedure, and force a restart. That is done. So let me just refresh and wait for, in my case, around 20 seconds. Okay, so now when this loads again, we shall see only Pablo receiving that, because I have set all the other editors to be to be with English. So in my case, I know, because I have done this, that Pablo is the only user which has the Spanish. Okay, so everything has been loaded. So let's create a store. And again, let me sweep back to Spanish. All right, and let's create the store in Spanish. So we have Madrid. So probably I can take another city, Ogi. Okay, so it's in Barcelona, and let's just send this for approval and wait for the emails. So in my case, I expect this to be only Pablo. It works.
Very nice. And I assume that you can use the same logic to make it send the request for approval email to the original author of the content item?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just click delete and try to create an item in English. So this time we shall expect the other 3 users to receive that. So let's create a new store, and this time it will be in Sofia. So let's send this for approval, and we shall expect all the 3 users, only 3 users to receive it: Petya, Greg, and Anton.
Great.
All right. So to answer your question, Ogi, I have prepared actually a sample which can show you that. So let's delete that. And actually I have planned this for a little, you know, after this one, but it's actually this one activity, which is called email logging activity. So in my case, I just provide a custom list, which in that case will be used by a developer. So that's more advanced case in which I provide a custom designer, this class here. So it's loading. Just give it a second, but in essence it has a text box which corresponds to a property which is called destination emails, which is here. And I allow the developers at build time to define this, to define the list of emails. So I can do that. For instance, we can go here and try to find that email logging activity. So it's here. So I can put it here and probably point down to it and use that alongside with the other one. And here I just need to provide a comma separated list of other emails. So it might be, for instance, a logging email in my case. Yeah. And what I'm trying to say is that you can use this email logging activity, or you can log things to file to have advanced auditing. So you can get any action you're interested in and drag exactly the same activity anywhere in the workflow. So in my case, is this your email, Ogi?
Yes.
Okay. So we can do this, of course, without the typo. And also we can do Peter. So both of us now can receive emails when an item passes through that particular state. We can also do this on delete item, for instance. So we can go here and I can copy this and put it right here. So you see how easy it is. You can get any event you're interested in and just point to it if you find the right spot with the mouse. Okay, we're done. Let's click save. And again, I'll restart the app because we've seen that when the service is already cached, the changes are not reflected. So now I forced application restart. And I can use the next 20-30 seconds just to show you what this activity does. Let's find it. So it's simple as that. I just comma separate the emails, and in my case, again I inherit this time from notification activity base, and the only thing I need to overwrite is the list of emails, and I get them from this text box from the destination emails.
Okay.
Cool. And what else?
You can get them from an external source as well. Right?
Absolutely. You can apply logic at runtime. In my case, I wanted to provide the users with ability to provide, the value from within the activities designers. And speaking about activity designers, you see it's just that file which is of XAML file. So it's not my strongest expertise, but I was able to build those pretty quickly. So it's very straightforward for those simple cases especially. And now everything has been loaded. So now I can create a new item. So we have a lot of cities in the world. So how about Tokyo? Let's just send this for approval. And now you see Ogi and Peter, that's me and you, we are in the list. And if we have the power to delete the item, we shall also receive emails, because this is the way we have used that. All right, so what's the takeaway from this example? In my case, it was a very naive email logging activity which just sends emails. But you can use this to execute and reuse all those activities all across those possible states during the content authoring process. So yeah, I know you've been developer before. I guess based on your experience for intranets, is it important to log all those different actions from the users?
Oh, absolutely. And there are some organizations that are under very strict regulations where everything that's being added, modified, or deleted needs to be tracked and logged. So I think for a lot of these unique scenarios, the ability to customize the workflow will come in very handy.
Yeah, and that's correct. I remember even in my first project ever, there was a chat application. So I've delivered a chat application, and 1 month later, the company, it was a corporate chat, came back to me and said, now I would like to track down what my employees are chatting about. So I guess first of all that means they were using that, which is good, and second of all it's very important for especially for organizations to track down the activity of their users. One thing on the topic, I know we plan something similar later on, content auditing as part of the built-in Sitefinity features. There is a little, not a secret, but it's something new for you from the kitchen, from the roadmap, from the product team. But for any similar cases, you can use the workflow. You see how precise it is, because if you use the events fired by the event system, you have to do a lot of checks, put it in the global ACX file. So,
well, just another practical example is the way I understand it. With this workflow customization, you can actually check the content or the new version of the content, and then hypothetically you can find specific keywords within the new content that could trigger a specific workflow.
yeah.
Is that correct? So, for example, if the new content contains something that's specific to a particular department of your organization, then you can trigger a notification to somebody who's responsible for auditing that particular department.
Yeah, you can interact with external systems. For instance, on a publish, using this approach, you can take the item and modify the item itself, which I will show you, or you can, for instance, send information to another system or a database. So you can see that the application of the workflow is very broad. So you can use this for many other cases. So you can use this as alternative to the publishing system as well. So instead of using the publishing system, you can use the workflow and take over and hook to the publish event. And you can, instead of using the event system, you can use the same workflow approach. So now I wanted to show you something that if I create another store, because here what I have done, I have hooked to the decision activity for the preview button. So when the preview button is clicked, I can send an emails as well, or log to a file, or any other not spy related things. So I don't want it to kind of focus on spying the people. So excuse me if I sounded like that. So let's create a city. City, Augie, help me.
What, with another city?
Yeah.
I don't know, Paris?
Okay. We have the Paris. Let's. Unfortunately, I don't have the preview button because it's not rendered for my specific condition here. But if I do it as an admin, I guess probably it would work. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to show you how the preview would work, but in my case, here the decision activity does not allow me to see the preview button. I can modify this and allow for that. But let's stick with the other samples I have prepared for you. And I've mentioned that you can hook to the publish event and work with the item, but the question is how to work with the properties of the item, because so far we have used things that using the security manager to get the current user, and this is the exact code. Not here. Let's close this, but here in the notify group by language, for instance, I have taken the user with the security manager. Where is it? Okay, var user, get user by email. And in my case, I would like to do something slightly different, to work with the actual item, actually take information from the context of the item, because one thing which is familiar for all those activities, that they have this execute method which passes the context object, which is called activity context, which has information for all things like the item itself, the user, the workflow, instance information, and so on and so forth. So let me show an example I've built for that. It's the modify store item activity. So again, since this actually inherits from code activity, you see I have to override the execute method, which is an abstract one, so I definitely need to override this. In the other cases, I was not forced to do that, because in the notify group, which inherits from the notify group, this notify group by language, actually it was implemented into the base class part of the Sitefinity classes. But in my case, I use the most simple case, the simplest case. So I inherit from code activity, and I see the code activity context, which has information for the item. So let's try to read the code and then put it to test. So I use the data context, which is context data context. From there, I just get all the properties. I can debug to show you all those properties. They're around 13, 14. You can just breakpoint here and see those. But in my case, you see I just get the one named master fluent, which carries on the fluent facade with the fluent API. So from here I can get this casted to the master facade for the dynamic items, and you see I can get the dynamic item with this fluent, get this fluent, then if it's checked out the way I expect this to be, then I can get this, and what I can do, I can get the actual item and for instance try to find the property named tags, and if there's a tag which is named technology, then we can alter the title. Simple as that. So it's a very simple case. We just work with the properties of the item before publishing. And it's very efficient because it will happen within the same transaction. So we won't go to the database back and forth, Actually, before saving changes, we'll execute this. So let's do it actually. So let's go to our workflow here as admins and delete that one. I think we don't need that anymore. So let's just delete it and stick with the default workflow. And speaking about default workflows, let's find this modify store item activity. Let's find it. And again, we don't have a workflow anymore, so we're in the default workflow. And let's find the publish logic. So we go publish, that's responsible for the button, and I've already injected that modify store item activity. And then you see it's just a built-in logic, which you see at the end of the day. Let's go here to open the properties so you can see the code. So you see it just checks whether the item is checked out, and if it's checked out, it publishes the item. If it's not checked out, it publishes the item directly after check-in. So it's simple as that. And so that's why I don't have save changes here in my code. So if I close this, in the code I don't have save changes. You won't see that because the following activity within the workflow will execute the save changes on my behalf. So this will be executed on publish. So let's do it, Togi. Let's do it. All right. So now I don't need to restart the app because it has been there before. So I just need to close that. Of course, I'm not authorized. So I need to go to stores and create a new one, or probably edit existing one. Let's get rid of all those because I don't like them. So let me just delete them and probably modify the quantum dollars. You know, it's a lot of oil rich, so probably we can provide a tag, which is technology. So now when we publish this, we expect the workflow on before saving changes to interact with the title and put something in front of it. So let's just click publish, and our logic shall execute. So it's high-tech quantum data. So
very nice. And then you could probably look for specific keywords within the content item and automatically assign tags or categories based on that.
Yeah, you can, for instance, have a bad word filter. And you know, those things are really hard to achieve because people can use asterisks or other things to, you know, cheat the bad words filter, but it's pretty powerful for, especially for other cases, and even that one, because in essence, using that approach, you just get the item and then you can modify it with the API. So it's any item, page item, dynamic item, and you can use that to interact with the item, get the properties, modify them if you need to, or you can get the properties and for instance, send them to another system or do some validation against some external criteria. So I think it's pretty powerful that way. I think that's one of the most powerful features of the workflow. You can hook to any point of the content authoring process, and within any state of the item, even preview for smartphones, wherever you get, and then you can inject all the custom logic. So you have everything. You can take the logic from the item itself, you can take the logic from external data source, and you can also take those parameters from within the workflow parameters like that. So there's actually another example I wanted to show for today, and it's something pretty popular. It's the page recycle bin. So the recycle bin is something which I know we'll implement probably later on this year, but that's my implementation I've done and I'm sharing with partners and customers whenever they want to. So actually it's something which I have optimized, and in my case I just get the item and I see the parent for this item. So if it's not the recycle bin page, I move it to recycle bin, and I allow the users to delete the item only if it's located into the recycle bin page.
So just to back up a little bit, initially you have created a group page that's called recycle bin, and you use it just to drag pages you want to get rid of, but you want to have the ability to restore them. And then you're using workflow to determine whether those pages are being deleted from the recycle bin itself, or if those pages are being deleted from other locations and they need to go to the recycle bin.
That's exactly correct, Augie. So I have two ways to show you how this works. So one is not so grateful approach. So let's open the pages workflow this time. And while this is loading, hopefully you can see the code. So I use exactly the same approach. I inherit from code activity and I have the execute method to override. And within this execute here, I can show the code. I get the data context again. With this code, I get the fluent facade. This is, in my case, a page facade. So I can work with the Fluent API, interact with the pages, which I'm going to use. I can get the page manager, should I need to. I can get the workflow item, which is actually, in our case, the page node being modified during the workflow. I can get the ID of that page if I need to, because it's also part of the workflow properties. Of course, you can get it from the workflow item ID here, but it's just to show that this is also passed through the workflow. Then I have the page recycle bin activity, which I have hard-coded here. So it's a string representation of the GUID of that recycle bin page. And then I do this check which is the parent of the page currently being passed through the workflow, and I check whether the recycle bin page exists. If it doesn't exist, I create the recycle bin group page from scratch if somebody has deleted this by accident or not. And once I assure that the recycle bin page exists, I just use the code to make that page child of the recycle bin page. I also change the property showing navigation to false, and to make sure this won't appear anywhere, I check out the page and unpublish the page, and then I save the changes, and then I throw an exception which will prevent further execution along the workflow. So if I go to the page approval workflow, which is that one, if I go to delete, you see it's located here. So this is the delete activity, and ideally I would like to interact before the page is actually deleted with that code, which let's try to show you this. That's the code. Hopefully you can see it. So this is where this is by default what Sitefinity has within the workflow. So it deletes the page based on the information about the language and the personalization segments, if there are any. And after that, it deletes the page and save the changes. So I would like to interact before that. So to do so, I just go to Toolbox, find the page recycle bin activity, and just drop it beneath that. So that's why I throw the exception. So when I move the page, I just throw an exception to prevent this from execution. Okay, so now I can of course click Save Changes, and now I can go to the workflows and apply this new workflow for the pages. So again, the same procedure: Settings, Advanced, Workflow, and within the workflow I just find the pages workflow and I point to our physical location with the customizations I've just done. So let's try to delete the page, Augie. I can delete any page of those, so let's delete the news page. All right, I'm in a rush, so I'm deleting the page, and now I feel sorry, but it says the page with the workflow exception. It says that the page has been moved here, so it won't be available in the navigation because it's unpublished. So if I view the page, it's available with the preview because I'm an admin. But if I actually try to access the news page itself, you see. And probably another thing which I can do is probably I can also create a very popular scenario, Augie, about an SEO. You can try to guess it, to have a broken link.
Yeah, so you're going to apply a redirect or something?
Yeah, that's another good thing which you guys can do. For instance, hook to the delete page or item event and apply the permanent redirect to prevent those broken links from punishing the SEO score. All right, so that's how the recycle bin works. And if I try to delete that, you see it's deleted forever because it passes through the workflow, it passes through the check, and it's that code here is executed. And now that's not very graceful with the exceptions. You know, there's a way to terminate the workflow. It's part of the workflow. We also have a Sitefinity specific exception, which is workflow security exception, which you can use. In my case, I have used this HTTP exception because it allows me to pass a message to the user, which is, for me, I think it's important. So if I decide to delete the workflow again, you see, we can see page downloads, page has been moved to the recycle bin. You can recover it should you need to with some little typo. So that's why I have used HTTP exception, so I can pass this valuable information to the user. With the Sitefinity exception, I was not able to pass it to the user. And let me show you another way. So instead of having this approach, I can just delete that and just use the old one, which is alternative way, which I have developed for you guys. Of course, I'll try to share this. Let me just delete that. Okay, so let's explore the code together. So I'll just open this in the code editor. You see that's a Visual Basic expression, which says if the page contains the language key, then get the language key and delete only the language, right? And if also the page, if also the delete context back, that's the message passed through the workflow, it contains the segment ID if we use personalization. Also delete only the segment, not the entire page, correct? So this is simple check, which is fine, but how about I interact with this logical expression and actually pass something like that? So I can copy and paste this because I would like to save it from some time, but it's exactly the same, but here I have added this logic. So I said, okay, let's get the page with the fluent. So if the parent ID equals the GUID of the recycle bin page, then just make it a child of the recycle bin page and check out the page here, right? And check out the page and then unpublish the page. So it's exactly the same code. And then we, if that's not the case, execute the same logic as before. So it's exactly the same. So now I can click OK. And again, I think this time I would need to restart the app. So again, guys, for those of you, that's a very good way to restart an app if you have access to it. It's very popular .NET thing. So I just modified the web config and I can restart. Another way, if you're in Sitefinity, you can just do a dummy change in the languages, in the language settings. This will also send the application restart if you want to restart the app remotely. That's a good way. You just go to settings, find the language, click save changes, and this will force application restart. In my case, in our practical thing, you see it takes less than 30 seconds, 20 seconds for me to load the app after application restart because I use the latest internal build which has some CPU optimization during application start, and also I use RAM disk for the temporary files. So if I go to that, you can see that in the web config, in compilation, if you have SSD, you don't have to use RAM disk, but I just moved this to a place in my memory, actually. If you have a solid state drive, this would speed up as well. Okay, with that practical tip in mind, now we can enjoy that new logic, right? So have I saved that actually? And I think I need to do, okay, I think I don't need to. So let's try to delete a page, this time users. It shall be exactly the same without any exception. Okay, so I delete the page and I expect the page to appear here anytime soon, and it's there. So why, just to give you a small tip, because I was wondering this myself, why the code is here in that logical expression in the execute code activity, which is a Sitefinity type. So the reason is that if you delete the page with this execute code here, then this would recursively call itself over and over again, because a delete action will call another delete action, so you can end up in an endless loop. So that's why we have chosen that approach of having those calls which can cause a recursive endless loop in that logical evaluation, which as it gets the property of true or false, executes the code itself. So that's it, guys. I hope this was useful, and now if you'd like to stay with us, we can answer questions.
Peter, we're going to make all this code available, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna make this code available. Oh yeah, we do, definitely. So I hope you guys like that. So let's see the questions, and yeah, and remember we have plans, unofficial, but based on the partner surveys, we found out that recycle bin is one of the most popular requests. So we will try to ship this in Sitefinity later on, probably in Sitefinity 7.1. Not yet confirmed, but that's our intention so far. So is it possible to invoke the workflow from web services? That's a question I've just received. Yeah, that's actually, this is how we invoke the workflow. So if I click F12 and just filter to web services calls, let's publish. You see that a workflow call will be generated. We don't see it now, but let's try to, for instance, create a page or open a home page. You see that any action we will do will invoke a workflow service call. So that's it. So you see we have the workflow service which is responsible for that. It has knowledge about many things like the item passed through the workflow, the information you would like to send to the workflow host. So it uses the very same Windows Workflow Foundation fundamentals, which is a client which uses a service call to send information to the workflow host. And one good thing which we have introduced recently, we have allowed this option to change the endpoint for the XAMOX files, which is good if you want to have reverse proxy configurations, because that was a big problem for more advanced. It has created some troubles for some partners, especially trying to have more complex setup. Now it's very flexible, so you can just go to the settings, find the workflows, and run the workflow as a WCF service instead of the old external XAMOX services. So this is, I hope this answers your question. All right, let's see the other questions with us. Yeah, there was a very good question, whether the content types are in the workflow. Yes, they're not, and why? Because that's the most simple type of content. We wanted to make it as fast as possible and good for performance, because that's the shared content type. That's why we have, it doesn't implement workflow. And when you build custom modules, you have this ability to decide whether to use workflow or not. So you see, with the workflow you have this flexibility, but you also have the extra logic executed behind the scenes. That's why, especially when you build custom modules from scratch, it's very important to see whether the benefits of implementing using a workflow will be more than the implementation effort for you to create a workflow, and of course the execution cost as well.